Call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. And public comment. Or sorry,
agenda approval.
agenda.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
I'll second that.
Vote by roll call.
All right. Counselor Caceres.
Aye.
Counselor Seha.
Aye.
Counselor Ecclestone.
Aye.
Counselor Lee.
Aye.
Counselor Sini.
Aye.
Counselor Wick.
Aye.
That is unanimous.
Moving on to public comment. Oops. Chat.
So if anybody would like to address the council, if you could raise your hand. There's a little button that allows you to raise your hand and we'd bring you into the meeting. I see we do have one comment in the chat, and that's fine if that's all you wanted to say. Council can see the comment in the chat.
Okay, so do you guys want me to read this out loud, or someone want to volunteer to read it out loud?
You don't have to read it unless you want to discuss it. It's up to you. Is that right, Colleen? The chat is recorded, or?
It's not recorded.
Okay, let's read it. So I'll go ahead and read it for you. This was a comment by a resident that said, see, that she visited the ponds, Aumsville ponds today, and I'm going to paraphrase, was sad since it seemed like it had not been maintained. The front is clean, the rest of the property, there's still a lot of damage, and has some concerns. And I can actually just address the Aumsville Ponds is a park that's managed by Marion County, and we certainly can pass that comment on to Marion County. I will say that we have had discussions with them about forming a partnership and some community groups to help kind of maintain that area a little bit, and maybe go through and try to spruce it up. It's just, we haven't been able to, they've been so busy, we haven't really been able to put a project together, but I think they're well aware that it's not on their high priority list for maintenance.
I think also the schools used to do something like the junior high and the high school. They would, like, one project was the cemetery, and then they would go to the ponds. They just haven't been able to do that with COVID. So a lot of things got missed.
Yeah.
No more public comments. We move on to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
Vote by roll call.
Counselor Caceres.
Aye.
Counselor Seha.
Aye.
Counselor Ecclestone.
Aye.
Counselor Lee.
Aye.
Counselor Sini.
Aye.
Counselor Wick.
Aye.
That is a unanimous vote.
Okay, no public hearing and no old business. That brings us to new business. First item is the review for the approval resolution number 05-21, a resolution authorizing the 2021 budget appropriation transfers in the water and sewer funds.
This is a yearly housekeeping resolution. We do this just before budget each year, and these are basically just internal fund transfers from one fund to another, and they're appropriated through our typical budget process, but we usually don't know until we get close to the end of the budget year what the close estimate is. And so we usually do these this time of the year. And I'm happy to answer a question if you have it about any of these funds. Most of them are related to, we have a 2% administrative fee at City Hall that we use based on our sales to manage water and sewer. It's not a lot of money, but it just helps offset some of the administrative overhead for that. And then there's one budget transfer from contingency for $112,000. That I think was related to the COVID relief funds that we had. And again, the rest are just general transfers that we do every fiscal year. So.
Is there any questions or comments? So do I have a motion to approve it?
I move to approve resolution 521 to transfer budget appropriations as outlined.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Vote by roll call.
Counselor Casares,
Aye.
Counselor Seha,
Aye.
Counselor Ecclestone,
Aye.
Counselor Lee,
Aye.
Counselor Sini,
Aye.
Counselor Wick.
Aye.
That is a unanimous vote.
Next item up is review for approval of resolution number 06-21, a resolution amending the transportation CIP without changing how do you say that?
Methodology. Yes.
Or,
And
go ahead.
methodology or the SDC rate of charge. So what this is if council recalls in our planning sessions, we went ahead and approved the design of both the Delmar East and Delmar West intersections. In that staff report, I indicated to the council that the Delmar West wasn't memorialized in our transportation CIP as an SDC eligible expenditure. However, our city engineer designated it as a new growth related expenditure because that area has been fully developed and there would not be any additional development that would occur that would trigger that. And so we went ahead and approved the contract, and in consultation with our city attorney, he said, you know, a cleaner way to do that might be to go ahead and just amend the CIP, not changing the methodology and not changing the rate. If we do either of those two things, then there's a fairly long process of notification that we have to go through, and there's a 30-day waiting period. But in this particular case, we're not changing either of those. So we're removing one project that's a less priority and replacing it with this project that is a higher priority. I did go ahead and reach out to the Master Builders Association representative for Marion County and discuss the project with him. At that time, he said he had no concerns, and actually it seemed like it'd be more beneficial. So it's before you tonight, and that's just to make sure that we cross our T's and dot our I's as best we can.
You're muted, Angie.
Any questions or comments? Do we have a motion?
I move to approve resolution number 621, amending city capital transportation improvement project list to include the Delmar West intersection design as presented by staff.
Second.
Okay, vote by roll call.
Counselor Casares,
Aye.
Counselor Seha,
Aye.
Counselor Ecclestone,
Aye.
Counselor Lee,
Aye.
Counselor Sini,
Aye.
Counselor Wick.
Aye.
And that is a unanimous vote.
Right, moving on down, we have item C, right-of-way discussion.
And this is really just a discussion because something came to my attention through the process of our daily workload here. And I just wanted to make sure we were administrating our policies according to council's desires. So the city's long held a policy, and there's good reason for this policy, of not allowing any encroachment or construction within the city right away. And recently we started to issue a type A permit for fences, all fences and all sheds. And that was part of our development design updates that we did earlier last year. In the process of that, it's actually been very well received and working well with staff, because we get to proactively go out and make sure people aren't constructing fences in the wrong place and not constructing them according to code. And then after the fact, they want us to just alter the code or give them a variance. And that's really hard to do because they didn't follow the process. In this particular case, this was addressed in the older part, our older neighborhoods, 5th, 6th, 7th Street, 8th, 9th Street, those streets down there. When the city constructed the roads, or the developers constructed the roads, they left extra space in the right-of-way. The right-of-way is 60 feet, and our typical road construction is required to be 60 feet. But years ago, we maybe didn't hold that same standard. So there's 5-6 feet of right-of-way, maybe more, depending on where it is on the particular street. Sometimes it's on one side of the street, sometimes it's a little bit on both sides of the street. We had somebody apply for a type A permit. We did a site plan review with them, came out to their site and indicated where the right-of-way was, which was 6 feet into what they thought their yard was, so 6 feet behind the sidewalk. And they decided that they didn't want to put a fence back 6 feet, so they deferred and just decided that they would cancel their permit. Across the street, or near that particular site, another resident did not apply for a permit and put a fence up in the right-of-way. It was also constructed out of compliance with our codes. So the fence has to come down regardless, and we've pretty much informed the resident that. However, it brought to light this right-of-way issue. If we're going to issue fence permits, we need to make sure that we're following our code, which is they cannot be permitted within the right-of-way. However, seeing how that affects a lot of the older part of town, I wanted to give council the option to weigh in. There are some options. They're not perfect options for us. If we wanted to allow fences to be placed in the right-of-way, we could either do basically a disclaimer on the face of the permit that basically would say, just because we issue this permit doesn't doesn't mean we're going to grant any special privileges over the right-of-way. And if the city needed access, the fence would need to be removed at the owner's cost. Or typically what cities do, if there's any type of an encroachment, is they have the homeowner sign an agreement that's then filed with the county and then becomes part of the title report. And that agreement is a little more extensive. And I put a copy of a sample agreement. We'd probably wordsmith it a little bit if that's the direction we went. The problem with that is it does take quite a bit of staff time and there is cost to it. So we would actually have to charge somebody to put an agreement like that into place. So the question for you tonight is, number one, to bring you up to speed that this exists. But then two, do we leave the policy as is, or would you like to discuss maybe a change in policy? And then if you discuss the change in policy, which is the best way to go to implement that change? Happy to answer any questions.
I'm a little torn. I think, it's their property. Why should we tell them they can't build a fence? However, On the other hand, if one person can't build a fence, at the sidewalk, then other people shouldn't either. So that's pretty tough one for me.
Actually, Councilmember Wick, it's not their property, it's the city's property. And that's really kind of where some of the confusion and why we're a little concerned about allowing them to put a fence there, because then they feel like it's their property. And 10 years from now, we need to go through there to do something, and then they're upset that we're tearing up their front yard. So that's one of the reasons why the policy's in place. But again, I kind of understand it. We're not utilizing it right now. Could they utilize it? It's one of those things where I'm on the, for me, I could go either way.
So for the time being, I think it's appropriate to, if we have documentation saying that maybe the street wasn't properly set up when the houses were built and, the roads were put in and sidewalks, but we will grant them access to come out further than they're technically allowed to. However, they need to sign the acknowledgement that if one day we have to widen the road or we have to encroach onto their property, that they're going to have to tear down the fence. But until we need that space, I think they should be able to utilize it.
I'll just mention from a title company side, anytime you create an encroachment, lender's going to require an agreement be signed if they become aware of it. So one way or another, they're going to end up with it. It would be better just to not allow them to build and save the money.
So I kind of so then my question is so what happens if or when someone sells the house, right? Are they going to take the fence down, or does that become the issue of the new landowner? And then, if I were to buy a house to find out that I needed it, Lord forbid something happened, and I didn't know I had to take at my cost when it wasn't even my issue.
Yeah, it's all stuff that's kind of in the agreements of the purchase, where sometimes the buyer may make the seller correct that before they take possession of the property, or it's a lot of paperwork, like Della, Councilors Sini was saying, where it's just paperwork and it's a little bit of a nightmare. But what's the best way to go?
There's really not a good answer, and that's why honestly I struggled with it from an administrative standpoint. And then I just thought, it's probably something that we need to discuss, because I could decide one way, doesn't mean that's the best policy.
Right.
The other way, there's no good answer. In any case, if we did allow the fence to be in the right of way, we would not allow it to go up to the edge of the sidewalk, because our insurance company have certain width setbacks that they require from our liability standpoint. So we still would not allow it if we were permitting it. It would still have to be set back a couple of feet.
For the insurance standards? Okay.
Well, because you're riding a bicycle down a 3-foot sidewalk. Today, our sidewalks have to be 5 feet. But you're riding a bicycle down, you got a car parked against the curb on one side, and you got a fence on the other side. It's a really narrow corridor to navigate a bicycle through, or a wheelchair, so we wouldn't allow it to go there. We would allow it to go somewhere, but that would then fall on staff to cite it through site development reviews. So again, it's not really a good answer one way or the other. Before we were issuing the permits, there were a lot of fences that were put in, and we didn't really worry about the placement because we weren't sanctioning them. We were just really looking at, were they over the height required. If they came and asked us, then we would cite in the location of the right of way for them. But because we're issuing a permit, I think either we need to reaffirm our policy and say nothing in the right of way, or we'll go ahead and cite these with one of the other mechanism. Personally, from an administrative standpoint, the title report agreement, or the title agreement, would would be obviously the best legal route to go, but from an administrative standpoint, it's a lot of extra work. And I would prefer we didn't go that route if we decided to permit them.
So my next question is up until this last issue came up, have there really been any other issues with the fencing and beforehand? Have they, like,
Yeah.
There has, but when we enforce our codes, you know, we're stepping up our enforcement the last year or so because we're trying to get compliance. But for the most part, unless it's very obvious, we're not actively enforcing until there's a complaint. And in this particular case, the fence was being constructed, and we drove by and found the fence being constructed. And the fence that brought this to my attention is going to have to be removed no matter what. It just doesn't meet any of our standards. But then it just raised a bigger question in my mind from a local policy standpoint. If somebody's putting in a 3-foot fence in their front yard, doesn't matter if it's, 4 feet in our right of way or 6 feet in our right of way. I don't know. I go back and forth. It's the technical part of how do we implement it that causes me pause.
It's challenging because you have several considerations. You've got, pedestrian considerations. You have public safety considerations from the standpoint of, fire vehicles able to get in there with their apparatus and stuff, given potentially some, barriers that could present themselves in addition to the normal barriers that present themselves during those emergencies. And you also have some considerations for, ADA. And I think, honestly, I think we would be better served if we did a better job of trying to enforce those right-of-ways versus because I'm not so sure, I could be wrong, but I'm not so sure that we'd have people clamoring to pay, a $250 permit fee on top of putting in fencing and then all the staff time that be required for staff to be able to do that. I'm not sure if it necessarily would, be beneficial versus just, working within the constraints we have to be able to just, better police, I guess, our right of way. And I think just going through that route would be honestly the better situation, just my opinion.
So, Ron, you're saying that if we keep it, just stick with the policy and enforce it, that's going to be easier?
Well, certainly from our standpoint, it's going to be easier. And a lot of people just don't put fences in the front yard, which is our preference. But on some of these streets, and I gave you a snapshot of one of the streets as an example.
Yeah.
It would be like 6 feet into their front yard. Although knowing if we were to allow them, we're only going to allow them to go, 4 feet into the right of way, not the full 6, because we've got to have a couple of feet there just because of insurance purposes. And then the question is if you do that and they put the fence and then they don't maintain on the outside of the fence, if there's no fence there, they maintain up to the sidewalk. If you put a fence in and you got a 2-foot strip, is that going to become a pedestrian hazard? So there's a lot of implications with it. And it was just more than I wanted to wrestle with as an administrator, all on my own. It just seemed like there wasn't a real good answer. On one hand, you want to try to be, as workable as you can with the community. But on the other hand, every time you make a decision, there's a bit of a downfall or a risk to it. So, well,
with everything being said, I could see how we could be compassionate for either side of individuals wanting some things, but in all honesty, we should probably stick with our policies and stay consistent, especially with people moving into town and not causing frustration of, oh, everybody had these great front yards that we allowed to happen, and then we made them rip it all up because we had to widen the road, or maybe there is an accident that happens because the sidewalk's too small, and then we're forced to expand a road and encroach into everybody's what they feel is their property, which is city property, and then it just wreaks havoc. So to more so help prevent collateral damage in the future, we just have to stick to our guns. So stay with our policy because of what we're probably going to have to do in the future. We're either going to frustrate people now or later. So do we just embrace it and stick with what we do and what we got, or do we let people just kind of do their thing in their front yards and then deal with the wrath later?
Well, on one hand, I'm torn because again, there's the ramifications. And then in this particular case, I don't want to reward somebody who didn't go through the process. They're not going to get rewarded no matter what, because they got to pull the fence. But at the same time, it's just difficult. It's not an easy question to answer. Everybody that weighed in on it all had valid points that I've wrestled with over the last week or so. And that's why I thought it was worth a greater discussion.
So it sounds like I'm kind of leaning towards just following our policy and continuing. Nico and Doug. Walter, are you still torn? I know Della, I think you were.
No, I think we talked about it enough. I think if everybody knows the answer is no, it makes it a lot simpler, doesn't it? So yeah, I think we should stick with what we have after talking about it.
Scott, do you have
Yeah.
anything?
I was partial to it on the alternative, but after this discussion, I'm in agreement with what Doug is saying. We should probably just leave it alone.
Okay. All right, then that's where I'll leave it, and we'll just go from there.
Moving on, we got the city administrator report.
Well, this is the off week, so I usually just give a verbal update. Our COVID-19 numbers have risen a little bit, 8 in the last 2 weeks. We're actually holding our own fairly well compared to some of the other cities within Marion County. I don't think we've seen the surge that Marion County has experienced, at least not in our zip code. So that's been good. Unfortunately, there is, I think the governor did indicate that we're going to go back into an extreme category set of guidelines or lockdowns. I hope it doesn't last very long. I know the community's frustrated. We're frustrated. We would love to be done. We'd love to be done with this. I think everybody's in the same camp there. We are working on our events planning committee with our corn festival. We concluded the Easter wrap up at the last meeting. Children's program is proceeding as expected and as scheduled. I think the children's program, movies in the park, Saturday market, all can still go on even if we are still in an extreme risk category, but I don't think we'll be there at that point. I think we'll start to see the numbers start to come down fairly quickly. So we're planning all those summer events, and we're just moving full steam ahead on Corn Festival. I do think there's a pent up need in the community to get out and celebrate, and we're just hoping that this summer is the year we get to do it and we're able to do it safely. We're working on a lot of initiatives, implementing some of the decisions the council made during their strategic plan, getting a lot of the contracts put together for that, and then managing the contracts that we have. We've continued to lobby our representatives for some relief or help with our wastewater treatment facility in the likelihood that we'll have to build it. There was an invitation today to speak with Senator Merkley's office. It went out to Angie, the mayor, and myself, because we did have a conference call with his staff. And we've reached out to everybody. We've reached out to our state representatives and our federal delegation. I connected with USDA last week on their current loan programs, just to see if there was like any chunks of money that came through the American Rescue Plan or the COVID relief funds that they might have extra, and everybody's in the loop. So, so we're gonna keep working until that facility plan's finished and we know what the outcome is, and we hope that we're able to get something to be able to help bring this project forward without too much impact on the community. And then I'm doing the final wrap-ups this week for the budget documents. The budget looks really good this year. It's sustainable. Last year, it looks just like last year's budget. We weathered COVID, wildfires, ice storms, flooding, all of that stuff. And, you know, we've got a budget that was able to bring the community through with and address the needs that we needed to address and do some proactive projects in the community. And I'll have a few suggestions during our budget session on some proactive projects for next year. Basically, I'm not identifying the projects, but I'm building in some of that one-time capital that comes in so that council can look at different projects and decide what to do. And just been, again, enforcement of our codes. Well, we're not that proactive about it, meaning usually something brings a violation to our attention, and then we go out and enforce it. There has been a lot of that lately, and it really can overtake our time. And so we've been dealing with a lot of that, and just trying to explain to everybody what the rules are. And oftentimes the comments are, you know, that it's really our fault because we should have actually been out enforcing them sooner. And because we let people get away with it for so long, you know, it's kind of our fault. We should have been out getting them sooner. So to some extent, I understand that, but I also know, you know, going from street to street and telling everybody, you know, what violation they have is not the easiest thing, and it does take a lot of time. So I would rather kind of bite them off in little chunks as they come forward than just have to go out and give everybody a list. So that's kind of what we're doing at City Hall. We got a lot of work going on. We've got a great summer planned and a lot of projects.
Mayor and council reports. Derek didn't pass anything to report on to me unless he told you something wrong. No. Anybody else? I have a question. What if we don't go into another lockdown for the county or extreme risk? What is our projection on having city council in person?
To actually talk to the mayor about that. We haven't been able to fully utilize our new equipment that was installed, but that's something staff and I need to take the time to do. Colleen's going on vacation, so she'll be gone until the middle of the month. But when she gets back, that was one of the things on our agenda. And what I told the mayor is it would be my preference to finish the kitchen remodel so that we're not in the middle of a construction zone. But when we do go back into meetings, you know, we should be able to do both virtual and in-person meetings. And right now, our stuff's got to be ordered, and it's 6 to 8 weeks for delivery for the kitchen remodel. So, you know, we're probably going to be into August, maybe the first meeting in August before that's all completed. So that's kind of the projection the mayor and I have in mind, and we'll just see how things progress between now and then. And then I think we could accommodate people in both venues.
Okay. If there's nothing else, go to the order. Correspondence? No executive session. I guess that if there isn't anything else, we can conclude and adjourn the meeting at 7:35. Oh, wait.